on this episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
I'm Fritz Zimmerman, and I have been at Chasing Giants for the last 30 years. I started in 1996, so about 30 years deep into this. Now, they have found Amorite tablets or Babylonian tablets from this time period where, this is like, kind of like a chalkboard, but they were using clay tablets. But their trigonometry that they were doing is actually as advanced, or, and some people say more advanced, than advanced trigonometry of today. So, I know you find it hard to believe that you can go and look at what biblical people did here in the U.S., but you can.
Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
All right, welcome to another episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast with your hosts Dustin and Caleb. We're very excited for our guest today. Fritz Zimmerman is with us, and we're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about a bunch of other things, including giants in America. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself, and we can go from there.
All right. Well, good evening, both of you, and everyone watching, listening this evening. I'm Fritz Zimmerman, and I have been at Chasing Giants for the last 30 years. I started in 1996, so about 30 years deep into this, and a lot of books. Wrote the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America, over 900 historical reports, giant skeletons. And so I don't think there's any doubt that Genesis 6:4, when it says there were giants in those days, is true. But most exciting is that those giants that they talked in the Bible were here. The same giants they talk about in the Bible were here. And I'm going to give you some evidence of that this evening.
Oh, sweet. Well, that's awesome to kind of just sit there and think about the idea that the giants were here. And you're talking about like the big burial mounds and stuff like that. Is I guess probably that you're going to talk about that a little later too. But I know I've heard some of those things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the geometric earthworks in the Ohio Valley. And, most of the giants in North America, they actually have been documented in 48 states in my encyclopedia, but the lion's share of them are in the Ohio Valley. And on your screen is Ancient America, the Dark Side. And that is the result of not only my own experiences of going to these burial mound and earthwork sites and paranormal experiences that I encountered, but over the years, people who contacted me who had also had paranormal experiences at burial mound and earthwork sites, and to hear their tales is a confirmation of what they is said in the book of Enoch, where it says of the giants that their spirits shall be earthbound. And so when you go to a burial mound, it's to know that those spirits are still there, that, they didn't move into any kind of heaven or Valhalla, anything else. They are there. And so when you go, they are what my friend L.A. Marzulli would always say is these sites are charged, and they're charged with spirits.
What are some things that people are experiencing at these sites? Some of these paranormal things that are happening to them. What are some things that they're witnessing or seeing?
Well, I mean, the whole gamut of the paranormal spectrum of shadow people, which I have seen, disembodied voices, which I have heard, different, voices in people's homes, UFOs being associated with the burial mounds. In a couple of cases, actually on Wednesday, I'm being hypnotized through regression therapy because I was at a conference speaking in 2012 after my first books were published. That was the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. and the Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to the ancient ruins in the Ohio Valley. And when I was at this conference, I went to a site with the owner who she had something called the Vortex Woods, where there was all this paranormal activity happening, and wanted me to go to these woods because they said there were burial mounds there, which I did. And in fact, there were two burial mounds. And then that night they had the Vortex tour, like 40 people, and there was a reporter from the Milwaukee Herald, I think it was. And when we were there, we had gone through and we finally got to the end of these woods into a clearing, and this bright light shoots across the sky, much bigger than like a shooting star or anything, like 100 times bigger. This giant orange orb that stopped above us, and it pulsated this orange and kind of red color for, I don't know, about 20, 30 seconds, and it slowly dissipated to nothing, just leaving the black sky of rural Wisconsin on that clear night. And it wasn't half a minute later that another one came streaking across the sky and did the exact same thing. That slowly dissipated. What was interesting is that Stanton Friedman was there at this conference, and I think it's Stephen Schmidt, who has written extensively on Area 51. And so went back, telling them all about it, what an opportunity, them being UFO guys,
Mm-hmm.
that they had missed out on. And the next night on our way home, I was with another author that lives in Fort Wayne. So I wrote at this conference with him. And on the way home, we turned down a road, and the sign said that we were 7 miles from I-30, and I-30 goes across the country. But then that was a road home. And I had mentioned to him, I said, well, I'll be home in 2 hours. It was 11 o'clock at that time. I said, I'll be home by 1. Well, the next thing you know, the sky had gone from, kind of light where we were going by Valpo, and we were dark again. And I looked at the clock in the truck, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning. Rick, your clock, I think it's messed up. I said, it was just 11. Now it's 1. All right. Well, they're ones, right? Maybe we missed something. So I checked my phone as I'd done earlier. I said, no, Rick, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I looked at his phone. It was 1 o'clock. Well, it turns out that from where we were to where we noticed that it was 1 o'clock in the morning, we had jumped over I-30 and we're 12 miles further down the road. Couldn't understand it. And we went down the road. We hit SR 14. That's a road that goes to Fort Wayne, but south. So I was like, we're too far south. I mean, how the heck did we get down to 114? So we turned around, drove back on the same road we were, 13, 14 miles later. Once we, driven towards 114, I guess it would have been about 16 miles. We hit I-30. And not only did we hit I-30, but the Porter County Airport was right there. And, when you drive by an airport, you see that sea of blue lights.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And past them. There's no way we could have passed it.
Man.
I was freaked out. He was freaked out even more than I was. He's kind of a scientific kind of guy. So he couldn't understand it. It really upset him on the 2 hours home, because he couldn't understand it. Neither could I. I mean, how could we go from here to there? 2 hours have gone by that we couldn't account for. 12 miles that we couldn't account for. So on Wednesday, I'm going this regressive hypnosis to see if I can recollect anything about what happened. So be interesting.
Man,
Well,
that's one way to start us off right there, my friend.
Yeah. Real quick, what are your thoughts? What do you think it was? Maybe it was related to the sighting you had earlier, or maybe it was completely unrelated, but I guess real quick.
Well, I mean, that's an awful strange coincidence that we had those two UFOs, and then the next night we have this lost time and lost distance, or space, or what happened. So I don't know. I've never been able to explain it. First, I was lucky that there was somebody else in the car.
For sure.
They experienced the same thing, and I was doing a podcast with a guy in I forget what his name was. He's out of Los Angeles, But he was saying, you should do regressive hypnosis. It's like maybe maybe you do have a memory of it. So I've been chewing on that for a couple months, and I looked, and we had somebody here in my city that does it. So I made an appointment, and that's going to happen on Wednesday.
Man, well, give it a shot. I mean, you could always just kind of see what happens. I've heard of the regressive hypnosis to try to unlock memories that maybe have been pushed back or something like that. I've heard of that before. And
Right. And when we're done, and if I'm under, she might give me a trigger word where if I hear it, I'll start clucking like a chicken. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Once I'm under, like you can do whatever she wants, but
yeah,
hopefully she's ethical and just
yeah.
wants to get let me tell my story, or if I can remember what happened. So
if
I
one
don't
of
know.
if one of your buddies are listening, they need to slip her a 20. That way, then she could do that without you knowing.
Yeah. Well,
Well, awesome. Well, man, that's a good way to kind of start us off here, and but kind of to bring us back into your topic. Uh, your so the first whole experience was all at one of these mounds, right? Is that kind of how it all started, and kind of these spiritual, and paranormal activities around these mounds, correct?
well, I started looking for mounds, back in 1996, and I went to 700 mountain earthwork sites. It was 12 years of doing this. So in my travel guide, I have 222 that you can still go to today. Um, if you went online and tried to do the same trip that I'm giving you, 222, you're going to maybe go to 30, 35. So if you want to come to the Midwest and look at mountains, you can go online and look at 35, or you can get my book and go to 200.
Man,
So it was very extensive. And, from the get go, there was always something, I don't want to say paranormal, but there was something charged at the sites. There was something different. It's really hard to put your finger on it. So back then, I really wasn't putting paranormal on it. But, in hindsight, that's exactly what it was, that, it was spirits that we were dealing with when we were going to these sites. So something has always been there, but it wasn't until, this is my 11th book. So this one just came out in November.
Hmm.
And this is just many years experience, and, stories and people that I interviewed. And it's interesting. It's getting really good reviews. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is in there also. And that's, is I've had this theory. I mean, it came out with this theory in 2010 with the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, that the people who built the geometric earthworks in the Ohio Valley were none other than the Amorites. The Amorites are talked about extensively throughout Deuteronomy in the Bible and other chapters. And they were the accounted giants in the Bible, but they were a real people, a real tribe. They actually controlled Babylon from 2000 BC to 1600 BC, and they were noted for their mathematics. Now, they have found Amorite tablets or Babylonian tablets from this time period where, this is like, kind of like a chalkboard, but they were using clay tablets. But their trigonometry that they were doing was actually as advanced, or, and some people say more advanced than the advanced trigonometry of today. So that's what we're dealing. So we're dealing with a people that was advanced. They were surveyors, because many of the tablets, there's land. Put the opposite on that image.
My bad.
You're good. You're good.
I noticed on this picture, I teach survey. I'm a high school teacher and I teach surveying, and the 3-4-5 method on here, but with the Pythagorean theorem in these line up, which I'm sure you're going to get into. That's crazy that those line up that
Right. And
just like that.
what we're looking at here is the Newark, Ohio earthworks, circle in the octagon, and then the hinge is there in the lower right. But using true north, which you can see coming out of number 5 there. So this is a map drawn by Squire and Davis. 1830s in the ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley, and see that line coming up. That's true north. So you see that
Okay.
that
Yeah.
true north is the number four of the Pythagorean theory. So it's true north. So a line from the middle of the octagon to the middle of the hinge or the circle there in the lower right, and then using east west, it's going to give you your 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triangle, and that's how these earthworks were laid out using a Pythagorean triangle. Now, keep in mind that the Amorites in Babylon had the Pythagorean theorem 1,000 years before the Greek Pythagorean had discovered it. So it was a rediscovered knowledge, not him coming up with it for the first time. So the Amorites have it, and then we have again we have it showing up here within these earthworks. Now this isn't an isolated case. I don't have that graphic, but Ball State University had looked at another rectangular earthwork here in Indiana, down in Winchester, and that was constructed using Pythagorean triangles. So this isn't a one-off; it's duplicated. So it's not. This isn't serendipitous by any means. So we do have other instances where the people that were doing this were using the Pythagorean triangle in the construction.
Yeah, because if this happens once, which that would be probably the chances of this happening once is probably pretty crazy, but happening twice, it's happening on purpose at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. So a question like the hinge on the bottom right there, what would these structures, what do you think they would have been used for?
Okay, I'm going to give actual photographic evidence of the hinge. But now, when you look at the octagon, I thought about putting this graphic in. I didn't. Now, that's an octagon. Now, all 8 of those openings align to lunar standstills. Now, the moon moves from north to south in the sky, and it takes 18.6 years for these lunar standstills from northernmost maximum moonrise, northern maximum moon set, moonrise to the south, but bing, 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 it's like 8 of them. So every one of those gateways is aligned to a lunar standstill over the course of 18.6 years. So this is a big calendar, amongst other things.
Okay.
Huh.
And you want to explain to people what the Pythagorean, what 3 squared plus 4 squared is 5 squared. Do you want to do that, Caleb, since you're the mathematician? Why don't you
Oh, you're a
explain that?
math whiz.
Sure.
Caleb.
Yeah. So using the Pythagorean theorem, like I teach this with students. Like, let's say we're going to build, we're going to pour a concrete foundation for a building, and we're working on getting the corner square. You can say, well, if I measure 3 foot this way and 4 feet this way, the hypotenuse of it's going to be 5 feet. So that's just a simple way that today people use it as far as building a structure. But so for instance, for this, the Pythagorean triangle basically says if, one side for a 90-degree triangle, if one side's 3 foot, it could be 30 feet, it could be 300 feet. Like a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a squared is 3, b squared is 4, then c squared would equal 5. So it's just a way that to make basically for a right triangle, so you can help build, an easy way to build structures and make sure things are square.
Correct. Now, the question we're going to always ask ourselves in this presentation, why would Native Americans do this? I mean, nothing against the Native Americans, but why would they have a Pythagorean theory? Why would they use it?
And that's what's interesting. You think, if they're building, say, some sort of a structure based off of the lunar calendar, you're like, why would they? Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think here what a good reason would be, but yeah, it's interesting that they can do that. And even back then, so what date do you think these were constructed?
Well, now there is, because we're dealing with universities, so we're dealing with woke. We're dealing with woke theories and the maintenance of woke theories. There was an excavation done by the Ohio Historical Connection, and they had carbon-14 from the hinge, and it dated 800 BC. but archaeologists don't like to put the beginning of who they call the Adena to about 200 BC. So they just didn't publish it. So they
Hmm.
found some other carbon little also that went around 200 BC. So that's what they published. Well, that's how universities work. It's make your hypothesis and then find evidence to prove your hypothesis, which is opposite of what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So we could go as early as 800 BC.
And how far? So like, let's say the hypotenuse there. How far is that? Is that 5 miles or is that like
No,
what's the distance there?
um, okay. The diameter of the circle that is attached to the I don't think I have this in an image, but the circle attached to the octagon, the diameter of that is 1,050 feet. So from the circle to the other circle to the hinge is 6 times 1050, and from the octagon to the square that's adjacent to the circle is also 6 times 1050. So what we're looking at, a little over a mile and a quarter, I guess.
Okay.
So those were measured out. I mean, those are exact measurement, circle to circle, octagon to square. So those were measured out based on the diameter of the circle. And an archaeologist might go, well, they use string. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah, be a long string.
Be a
Oh
long
yeah.
string.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Really
So
long.
could
Long
you
string over, rolling terrain. There's no way you could get that accurate unless you were surveying.
Yes. And could you explain real quick what the hinge actually is for those listening that can't look at the picture here? And
Yes, and
yeah.
I'll show you some photos of what this hinge is and what it does.
Okay.
But okay, hinge. Now you all know Stonehenge. Well, you know the stones, right? Well, around those stones is a circular earthwork with an interior ditch and an outer wall and a gateway. And in this case, the gateway at Stonehenge is aligned to the summer solstice sunrise, as most hinges are aligned to solar events. So when I say hinge, I'm not talking about the stones, I'm talking about the earthwork that goes around it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Circular earthwork, interior ditch, outer wall, gateway aligned to a solar event.
Okay. Okay.
And it looks
I
like
mean,
these two hinges are lined up, pointing basically in the exact same direction as well. Like they seem to be lined up very well.
Right now, the lower right, that's a hinge, but the circle and octagon, those are not hinges.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go to the next. Let's go to the next screen over here. All
that
right.
one
Now
right there.
this is a little harder to tell. Now, do you see that triangle in there? Can you make that a little bigger? There we go. Okay. Now, from the middle of the octagon. Now, let me give you an idea of the size of the circle and the octagon. See how you see those lines of rows of trees? What you're looking at within the circle and octagon is a regulation golf course. The regulation golf course is all within the walls of the circle and the octagon. There's not holes
Okay.
outside of it. They are all contained within the circle and the octagon. To give you an idea of the size of it. But from the center of that octagon, it was a little hard to make out in this picture, to the middle of the hinge, which is there to the right. You see where it comes down, see that circle, that's the hinge. Now, the highest point of ground in that area is called Geller Hill. And so those from the circle and octagon, that apex of the triangle, that's Geller Hill. There's burial mounds there. And there's some crazy paranormal stuff that happens up there. I've been with Newark Paranormal, and yeah, it's nuts. But from the octagon, middle of the octagon to Geller Hill, and from the middle of the hinge to Geller Hill is 7,130 feet, both of them identical. So that makes this a perfect isosceles triangle.
Huh.
And also, it means that Geller Hill was actually the axis mundi of the site, meaning from Geller Hill, everything was planned out. So it begins with the triangle 3. and the triangle, what that means, like, the pyramids, it's a rejuvenation of life, and three, and what three means in the Bible. And but again, what we're talking about here is survey. And then to have, you don't have an isosceles triangle. It's not by chance, not when we're dealing with 7,130 feet. So this was, deliberate, on purpose, using surveying. And then that was the beginning of laying this whole complex out.
I mean, my question I would kind of want to ask here is what did they use to survey? Like, how do you think they surveyed it out? You know, because it almost looks like you need to get like this aerial view to really be able to see it.
Well,
Or,
well, well, now here's the thing though. See, the circle and the octagon, when you're at ground level, I mean, yeah, you can see a gateway. Every one of the gateways to the octagon, there's a mound right there in the gate. You can make that out, but when you're building this, I mean, how do you check your work? Because it's really only visible from the air.
Mm-hmm.
And the circle, and then there's parallels to connect the circle to the octagon. I mean, there's parts of you can make out, but imagine looking across a golf course at a 8-9 foot wall on the other side. It's really, I mean, you just can't dead reckon this on site.
yeah,
The only way all this was built was surveying. And I don't know how the Babylonian Amorites were surveying, but they were doing it. And we have tablets with them doing it because people were purchasing land. And when you purchase land, somebody has to come out and survey it, so you have exactly know where your land starts and where your land ends, and somebody else buys a property where theirs does. So we know that they were expert surveyors. And now we come over here and we have expert surveyors, not only in the construction of the octagon, these large geometric earthworks, but here at Newark, in just the spacing of the Pythagorean triangle. And in this case, we have the isosceles triangle. So both of these last screens are serious surveying
yeah.
skills.
I mean, it really sounds like it. I mean, I, my dad actually works for the USDA, and I've done some surveying with him, and even that, I mean, it was all GPS monitored stuff like that, where you're making points on a map. It's like, and then you look at this and think, okay, people were doing this, way back then, and then you sit there and you kind of think about that question you posed earlier: is why would the Native Americans, want to do this, or why did they do this?
Why would
And
they
it's
care?
why
I
would they
mean,
care about it? Yeah.
where is this within their religious canons? I mean, what can we garner from today's religion of Native Americans to say, yeah, this is what they were doing? That the triangle is, like the most important, image, or geometric image. Well, geometric anything, really doesn't exist. So anyway, this is just another instance where you're going to have to question the origins of this earthwork complex. So this earthwork complex, and these geometric earthworks are all over the Ohio Valley, but we're just going to concentrate on this one today. But I get into a deep dive in ancient America, the dark side. I really do a deep side of everything. There's more. There's far more than to this than what we're going to cover here in this short hours. But yeah, let's just go to the next one. See what we have. Okay, this is where it gets crazy. It's color coded. Color coded. Now, in the ancient geometer's art, there's something called the sacred marriage, the sacred marriage of opposite. And that is a sacred marriage of the male god, sun god generally, and the female lunar or earth goddess. They represented the male sun with the circle, and that is the spiritual. The female goddess or earth goddess was represented by this square, and that is the material. Mathematically, the square, we deal with whole number, but the circle can only be measured by fraction. And the greatest art of the geometer was to represent this sacred marriage was by what they call squaring the circle. Caleb, which mathematically cannot be done. But you can make a square and a circle that have equal areas. Like I said, one you're dealing with fractions, the other dealing with whole numbers. The square is whole, circle is not. Spiritual and the material. The square is the material mother, and the circle is the spiritual sun god. So now let's go red to red. We have the red circle attached to the octagon, and then opposite of the hinge, which is the lower right. We have better pictures of that coming up. The area of the circle attached to the octagon is equal to that of the square opposite of the hinge, the red to red. So circle and square, equal areas, representing the sacred marriage of opposites. Now, if you place a square within the octagon, now we're at the green, the area of the square within the hinge is equal to the area of the hinge, circle and square. So we're going to move from the material square to the circle, the spiritual. So these are it's kind of different because the red and thing are not put together; they're made opposite. Now, there's two things. You could either square a circle, or if the perimeter of a square equaled the circumference of a circle, that as well would be considered joining those two earthworks spiritually. So the green circle, and then opposite that, you see the gateways in the lower right. See how the gateways are moving towards the red square? Well, the circumference of the circle, that's the hinge, is 3,700 feet. Each side of the adjacent square, each side is 925 feet. Times 4 is 3,700 feet. So the circumference of the circle equals the sum total of the sides of the square, making them geometrically a sacred marriage of opposites. And now see how the energy, how the gateway is moving from the square to the circle, moving from the material into the spiritual. So there would have been some sort of movement from one to the other. And you can see like how they're attached, moving to the square. You can make your way back over to the octagon. So see how the energy of these are moving back and forth through these gateway or these earth berms. So that would have them moving through. So that's a little of the mathematics, but this is ancient. This is an ancient art. This is old world religion. You would probably more be familiar, sacred marriage of the yin yang, of that perfect balance of powers. So this is really a manifestation of that. That's what we call it today. Back then, they would have called it the sacred marriage of opposites, the holy union. So there's this is in the ancient world very, very significant, and one of the few places in the world where it's just so obvious of what they were doing. So again, what we have to know how to figure out the circumference of a circle. Again, don't tell me with strings, which some archaeologists will say, no, it's pi r squared. Isn't that right, Caleb? Pi r squared?
For that's for the area. For circumference, you would do pi times diameter for the circumference.
Okay. So you're gonna have to do that. So we're dealing with advanced mathematics.
But again, you would have to know pi for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to know pi.
Yeah.
So now we have surveying skills, and we have surveying skills. We know Pythagorean's theorem, and they knew pi. Now, what Native American tribe is it? Or is it not Native Americans? And this is the Amorites, who we know had advanced mathematics, and we know they had surveying skills, and we have in the Ohio Valley right here. Now, before anybody wants to get race, and this is racist, or whatever it is, definitely go into a deep dive in this in Ancient America, the Dark Side too. What we're dealing with is not a race. What we're dealing with these Amorites is a completely different species of man. In the ancient giants, I have a division in there of Neanderthal hybrids. A lot of these skeletons that they find in the Ohio Valley and elsewhere were noted for having a protruding brow ridge that would be more indicative of an archaic skull, somewhat even almost Neanderthalish, especially with the fact that and that is kind of what it implies. There's kind of a round fissure that goes around the back of the head, and that is where the bun is. But it was more indicative of a Neanderthal, would
Hmm.
have an occipital bun, and it would not show up in a modern Homo sapien. Um, and like I said, we could talk an hour just about, skull types, but we're talking about a different species. And in the Bible, it says of the giants, there were giants in those days, and also after that, the sons of man uh, saw the daughters of men, or the sons of God saw the daughters of men. That is the root of the giant. So even the Bible refers to these not being entirely human, but a hybrid race.
And I can real quick read in, and this is in Amos where it talks about the Amorites, and it says, which it's talking about God. It says, "Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of cedars, and he was as strong as the oaks." So that's an example where it talks about the Amorites, being giants um, or being very large for sure.
Yeah, not as, I mean, cedars, I mean, it's a little bit elaboration because really the largest giant you're going to find was about 9'7", 9'8". So when you see accounts where it's like 12 foot, 15 foot, 18 foot, no, 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 those are just made up. About 9 foot. Even Og, who was in Bashan, Og was an Amorite, right? And Og's bedstead, I've read some different interpretations of that, but I think 9.5 foot would certainly be more um, in in parallel to what we're going to find in the Ohio Valley, because 9.5 foot was the largest, and that could have been Og. Og, interesting because he's far more of your life than most people realize. I mean, they just think it's some small character in the Bible, but we really affected a lot of our etymology of words. That Og was the all-knowing eye in the sky is where we get ogle, or to goggle, or to be googly-eyed. And every time you get on the internet and you Google something, is a reference to Og. That Og was all
That's interesting.
that Og was all knowing is where we get the word cognizant. There's a lot of words. And in uh, Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, I have a whole chapter on the etymology of Og, of all the different words that we use today. That Og was a lived in keg is where we get the word troglodyte. That he was ugly, and these men had different faces that were so different than what we know today, is where we get the word ugsome. And that is a word derived from Og. And it's also derived from how strange these people looked opposed to other men in that region. So there is some tracking down of some of this we can do just through language. So anyway,
My question I was kind of thinking about is, do you think the Amorites like built these things just completely by themselves, or did they build these things with the Native Americans' help? Like, not necessarily
yes,
the
they
help,
did.
but like they were the mind that figured out and told them all, like, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, or is that kind of what we're
And
talking
it's
about
kind
here?
of like I don't know if y'all seen those AI generated videos where it's like the giants are helping the Egyptians make the pyramids. It's so you kind of
Oh.
your thought kind of reminded me of that. Oh
So
yeah.
The Dakota Sioux were down here, and they were heavily involved in all of this. So the Kansas, I could see Mandan, all the Dakota Sioux, and their history is that they were living in the Ohio Valley at one time, and the Algonquin history places the Dakota Sioux down here also. So I don't want to say that this is, it was all Amorites, because the Dakota Sioux were involved in all this as well. And they would eventually become platform mound builders. And so Cahokia and a lot of the platform mounds you're going to find throughout the Midwest were takes the Dakota Sioux from 300 BC all the way up to about 1400 AD. So this is their legacy right here as well. So they incorporated this into their religion. But yes, they were guided by the Amorites, who
Hmm.
were here in
Okay. Okay.
numbers. They were here in numbers, but the Dakota Sioux were right there with them, and this is much their history as anybody's.
And I guess one question, real quick, we can touch on is how would the Amorites? How do you think the Amorites got from, say, Canaan to the Americas?
Well,
That
that's
could be a
an
big
interesting
question.
question because, it's surprising that archaeologists can believe that Neanderthals somehow found their way to Australia, but they don't think that a people who was new pi square root could navigate, and especially across the northern tier of coming out of North England and through Scotland and through all the islands there, and then over into Iceland, which isn't that far, and then from Iceland to Greenland, and from Greenland down into Labrador. Not that big of a deal. Now they
Yeah.
came here for the copper, and Isle St. Royal. There's 500,000 tons of copper that are missing that were mined from Isle St. Royal. And one archaeologist said it would have taken 10,000 men 1,000 years to mine all that copper. And what's also interesting, if you look up something called the Old Copper Culture and you look at their weapons, they transitioned from tang weapons to sockets. And the socket was developed in 1500 BC. And it was a significant military advantage when they came out with the socket to hold a spear opposed to a tang, which is just a long thing coming out of a spear that you would have to haft onto a spearhead. Now, with a socket, it would just fit onto there. And, the harder you push it, and it's something we still use today with your garden hose and your shovels and everything else. So it was a unique advantage. So you look at these weapons with the copper culture, they moved from the tang to the socket, just like they did in the Middle East. The sockets had rivets, even to secure them more. Rivets developed in the Middle East, and we have them over here. We have them at the same time period. That's something you can look at on your own. So, but yeah, they came over here originally for the same reason anybody does anything, for money. This is in the middle of the Middle Bronze Age. And so, what do you need for bronze? You need copper. And one of the greatest deposits is right here in North America at Isle St. Royal. So, they were coming here to get that. We have 50,000 tons of copper that is missing. There's no account for. Where did it go? Where could it have gone?
Hmm.
Couldn't have gone to anywhere else but here because, according to the archaeologists, no one else was here, right?
Yeah.
So it's just in a cave. It's all hidden somewhere. Maybe they buried it. No, it all went over to the Middle East. This was the weapons that were, you had the Hittite armies, you had the Egyptian armies, you had the Hebrews. Very likely that the spears that Moses was carrying was that of Michigan copper.
I mean,
Wow.
that's really wild to think about it. So they were possibly mining, or they were mining copper here and then shipping it back. And so they had a trade route in essence
Yes,
established to go back
right,
and
and that's
forth.
what brings them here, probably around 2,500 BC, and then that went on for about 1,000 years, which is kind of matches up. It was 10,000 men, 1,000 years that were mining that to mine all that copper out of there. So, well, let's go to the next slide. All right, we just talked about this before. I just wanted to show you how everything was measured out. 6 times 1050. 1050 is the diameter of the circle attached to the octagon. And so, it's just, everything's measured out. So nothing's haphazard. It's all measured out correctly. Now, there's another map I have, but from the octagon to the square upper, that is also lining up with like a maximum moon set. And it's another map I have. But anyway, had like a dual purpose from the octagon to that square. So it was also acting as a lunar alignment. So we have square and square, lunar and lunar, Earth Mother and Earth Mother. So I don't want to stay on this one very long. I just wanted to point out that how mathematics was going on this. Okay, now what we're looking at here is, now this is the hinge, and follow the sun straight through. Now that building you see, that is the museum that the Ohio Historical Society put in the gateway. Now, this is May 1. This is Beltane. On each side of the gateway, you see the ditch coming out. And I wish we had a better picture of the hinge so you can kind of see it. Then it would kind of give you more of a perspective of where we're launched in here of showing you. But so follow the sun straight through into that building. That's the gateway. And then that's the gateway of the hinge. Just like Stonehenge aligned to solar events, this is aligned to May 1. We can track the history of Beltane that is more associated with the Celts, but the Celts got it from an earlier people that were in that region. They were also Amorites. Stonehenge has its roots with the Amorites. The hinges in Ohio or in England have their origins with the Amorites. But Beltane, May 1, also has its origin in the ancient Levant and with the Amorites. That's where it originated. Actually, the word Beltane is a reference to Baal. We all know Baal from the Bible. That was the god of the Canaanites. And the Canaanites and the Amorites are basically the same people. So whenever they say Canaanite in the Bible, put a slash Amorite next to that. But Canaanites and Amorites were in fact the same people. The Amorites were more sea people. The Canaanites were more inland. But in the biblical lands around the Jordan River where the Amorites live is full of stone circles. There's been things that look like Stonehenge was there at one time. But many of your megalithic era things are, to be found there in those biblical lands. So anyway, this is the hinge and it's aligned to Beltane. Beltane, May 1, is not a date which is called a cross quarter day because it's not equinox or it's not a solstice. It's a cross quarter. It's between those two. But this has its origins. This is what you would find mainly in England. These alignments, you would find May 1 alignments throughout England and Ireland, more so in England. But again, having its origin over in the ancient Levant, it shows up in England. It shows up here, really nowhere else in the world. So while this one's a little hard to take, now the opposite, solar opposite of Beltane, now Beltane was considered to the Celts was the first day of summer. And then the solar opposite of that is October 31st. So this is the day, May 1, that veil between the living and the dead was very thin. So that was kind of communing with the dead at an earthwork like this. But then more so October 31st. And of course, we all are aware of Halloween and, what that means. And, Halloween also has its origin with the Amorites. So while May 1 has that, the next slide is going to show it a little bit better because this is the October 31st alignment. And like that. Okay. Now we got a better sense of the hinge. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're looking at the gateway. These two gateways come out, but there's the gateway to Earth, and you see the interior ditch that moves around. And now we're looking at sunset on October 31. There's no doubt of that alignment.
That's just wild to think about with the two different alignments, and even kind of just setting up the whole idea of the math and just the thought and the prowess of following the sun and studying the stars that goes into even just building something like this and just setting it all up. To me, it's kind of just mind-boggling looking at that.
So you can read about the Bible, or you can go to Ohio and you can live it. You can go it. You can walk in it. This is Bible right here. These are people in the Bible built it. And they showed you they built it. They showed you with mathematics. So in the future, there would be no doubt. They didn't put this stuff. They put this math, this surveying there for a reason. Look what we can do. Look what we know. Because in the book of Enoch, it says that the giants were given secrets by the sons of God. And these are the secrets, this math, this advanced mathematics. And they're showing it to you. And now on October 31 and May 1, But October 31, when this is taken at sunset, not sunrise, sunset, is when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. This is where the Amorites are here. They're at this earthwork on
So you
October.
you mentioned just a minute ago. So you said something about Halloween and the Amorites are connected in a way. So what's that connection with the October 31st? What is that connection?
Well, we can go and we get more so from the Celts, is that on October 31st, the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. And so the Celts, so that the dead would not bother you, you would disguise yourself. So that's why people wear costumes on Halloween. It's to throw the spirits off that might be looking for you. So that's the purpose of a disguise, was to evade spirits, because now the spirits are set free. But they had to have a temple like this where that veil could be broken and they could move into this world. That's the purpose of this earth.
So
So
you're
it
saying so the spirits would have a veil and a way to come into
a
this
doorway.
a
It's a
doorway.
doorway.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
and that gate. Now, what's interesting is, I was involved. I was shooting, ancient paranormal this last winter, and unfortunately ran into like the coldest winter ever. We got delayed, but we did some paranormal investigation at this earth, which I never do, but I did anyway. Um, but, and if I don't prove this, who else is going to, right? So I get a little bit of a pass. Um, Now the activity is on the outside of the earthwork. Once you go in, it gets clean. And the only thing we had was it was an ovulus, and the only thing that would come up was an arrow. And I never could figure that out, but the arrow is saying it's like nothing's going to be in here. It's all sacred ground. That interior is all sacred ground. Everything is being pushed through that gateway. But outside of this gateway is where all hell's breaking loose. That's where the spirits are coming out, not inside, outside. They're all coming out. And
So, oh no, all I was going to say is, was there something that, when they finished building this earthwork, was there something that they would do to like, almost like a ceremony type stuff that they would do on a regular basis to continue, continue it working, or is it just kind of one of those things that once it was built, it's just there and it just operates?
yeah, well, they would have come, probably, every October 31st, every May 1st. They would have come for the lunar event, to the octagon. But I think they would have come here, to pray to their ancestors. See, they were in ancestral worship. That's what the burial mounds. You would build a burial mound, and a lot of times there were charnel houses and there were cremations. Sometimes in a burial mound there might be two people, in other there might be hundreds, maybe 1,000 people that were cremated in one of them. But with ancestral worship, you worship at the burial mound to your ancestors, not as your relative, but as a collective of the dead. The dead was a collective. So you would come and you would worship this collective of the dead, not any individual person. Because once they were buried in the mound, they no longer were individuals. They were part of a collective. And this collective would grant you prosperity and, some other things, that you would pray for. So you wouldn't be praying to a God, you'd be praying to your ancestors. And this was part of it. And this was a way for those spirits to come into this world. So that's what's happening here. Well, it's happening, while this photo is being taken. So, but like I said, this all goes to the Amorites, which they've shown what they're serving and the math. And then this is their religion, which we can take back of Salmon and, Beltane, May 1, October 31st, back to those people. And it's just more evidence. But like I said, now you can go to Israel for Bible, sites, or you can just go to Ohio.
And real quick, I wanted to ask what are the sizes of some of these bones that have been found in some of these mounds. And I know that, of course, you've talked a little bit earlier about kind of what they are like and what the different bones are like. What are some of the sizes of things that have been found at these places?
I started about 7 foot, and I think 9'8" is the largest. But a lot of 8 footers, a lot of 7 footers, a lot of 8 footers, very few 9 footers. But around 7.5 foot would probably be, if you were driving like a bell curve, about 7.5 foot would probably be a good average. And so you say like, well, we have 7.5 foot today. Like, yeah, you do. But I live in a town of 250,000 people. There's never been anybody 7.5 foot born in this town ever.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And like, well, there's 7.5 foot, and then yeah, it's like, yeah, they come from all over the world to get those players. And well, for instance, in Charleston, West Virginia, and I have this in Ancient America, the Dark Side. Just in Charleston, West Virginia, I think there was 7 skeletons, like 7 and 8 foot, and some the Smithsonian. Now, this is all descriptions from the Smithsonian. They measured the skeletons, and they would say very large, extremely large, is how that they would describe these. And these are all within one city, and like in 5 or 6 mounds, they all had giants. So we're talking about one city that had all of these in there. So they're all concentrated. Now, I'm saying I live in a town of 250,000 people, and in the history of this town that goes back 200 years, not one person has been 7.5 foot. So what are the odds? Unless this was a race of giants, the here you had in Charleston, I can tell you there's more people living in Charleston now than there was, 2,500 years ago. And I can tell you that in Charleston, West Virginia, no one's ever been 7.5 foot coming out of that town. Probably.
Man.
And I looked it up. Like one of the tallest basketball players ever from Romania was 7 feet 7 inches. So that kind of gives you an idea of like some of the tallest basketball players. It says there was one who grew to 8 feet after he was done playing basketball, but eventually grew to 8 feet. So it doesn't happen very often, like you said.
No,
And
no.
I've got plenty of 8 footers in the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America. Plenty of 8 footers, a lot of 7 footers, probably more 7.5 footers than anything. But then, a lot of 8 footers, then we'll go right up to 9 foot. So 900 accounts. If I was to chronicle every large person on Earth today in the last 100 years, how many people would I have in my book? 50, 30, maybe 30, 40. And I have 900. So what's up with that?
So I guess one of
There
my
were giants in the earth in those days.
yeah, I guess one
yeah.
of my last questions are, why can't we go see these bones?
Oh, you can.
You can. Where at?
Oh, this is in Newark, Ohio. This is all public
Really?
land.
Yeah.
That's all public. You can go to the Circle and Octagon. You can go and see this. Yeah, it's all public.
Well,
And my
so what
travel
about
guide,
the
there's
bones?
oh, now the bones, that's another
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Well, see, there used to be in Ancient America, the Dark Side. I actually have a 7'6" skeleton that was on display at the Grave Creek Mound, which is the largest burial mound in the Ohio Valley at 70 foot. But there was a 7'6" skeleton on display, and I have a photograph of that, and it has an archaic type skull. But it was on display in that museum, and now if you go to the Grave Creek Museum, when you first enter the door, there is a sign. There is no such thing as giants.
Huh.
It's a bunch of silly Photoshop pictures of one where they have a skull and a wheelbarrow, which is ridiculous. Of course, it's not that big, which is so ridiculous because that museum closed, I think, in late 1970s. So 50 years ago, they had one on display, and now, because of woke, the wokeness, now it's like, no, giants never existed. It's like, you had a giant in your museum. Now, I don't know where that giant is. I'd like to find out what happened to it. I'm going to say it's still there. and they just don't want anybody to know about it. But I do have a photo of it that I got from a guy who had gone to the museum. Not only that, he actually had notes from the man Del Nora that ran the museum, and he had like a drawing on there. It's large skeleton, and showing where they were displaying it. But I have an actual photo of the skeleton in the case, and that's in the book shown right there. So
Man.
everything that we've talked about today, even though I have books on the whole subject with the Nephilim Chronicles and the encyclopedia for 14.99, everything we've talked about tonight, I did a lot more of a deep dive in the book shown on the screen.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for just sitting down with us and let us just ask you questions as we're trying to kind of figure this out. Where can people get in contact with you and where can they buy your books? You could talk a couple seconds about that as we kind of close out here.
Yeah, well, the books are on Amazon. This book here is 14.95. The Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants. If you want to read more about what kind of I call like a Neanderthal hybrid of these skeletons, and just to know that they were not a race but a different species of man, and to know that what the Bible says is true, and it'll prove that it's true in that this was a hybrid race, and so it's not lying, and so let that be an affirmation, if you. And then like I said, I do that whole thing about this being a different species in this book right here. So start out with ancient America, and then if you want to know more about numerology and sacred geometry and the Nephilim Chronicles, fallen angels, and the encyclopedia, I get more into that. And if you want to come to Ohio, or if you just want to be an armchair archaeologist and visit the sites in the comfort of your chair, get the Nephilim Chronicles, a travel guide to the ancient ruins to the Ohio Valley, and I have photographs and histories and directions to 222 sites. So a lot of the giants that I talk about, those mounds are still there. Directions to Newark and some of the other geometric earthworks in Ohio Valley that are still accessible today. Those are all in there. And knowing too that all the address restricted mounds are included in Ohio. If you want to go to Ohio to see the mounds and you go online before your trip, they're going to take you to 25 mound sites. If you buy my book, I will take you to 70. So I say if you go online on a trip to Ohio, for every site you see, you'll pass by two,
Huh.
because they have sites they're huge mounds. They're size of 3-story homes, and they're address restricted. They're address restricted from you because academia thinks you, the American people, are a bunch of idiots, that if you were given the knowledge of where these burial mounds were, you would have no other choice but to destroy them, when in fact they're the ones destroying. So I lifted that veil of secrecy of address restricted, and now address restricted is just as simple as getting my books, and it's all revealed in there. And like I said, you can either go to them or you can just at least look at them. For the first time in history, there's an ancient world that is revealed in that book.
I will
That
say,
is-
if you do ever find any giant bones and you're looking for a museum, we have a museum that will display them in Abilene, Texas. Yeah, the Creation Museum. We interviewed a few episodes ago. They would love to have something like that.
Well, because of NAGPRA and because of woke society, and some of it I get. They don't want to put Native American bones on display. To have respect for that, and I did say that the Amorites were there, but also the Dakota Sioux were there as well. So yeah, it's kind of a fun. I mean, it would be cool to do now. L.A. Marzulli is supposedly coming out with some DNA on some of these
Wow.
skeletons. Many of the skeletal types in the Ohio Valley are also found in South America as well.
Hmm.
And he's coming. Well, he came out with some DNA. Now he's coming out with some others. referred me to Debbie. He was supposed to send me that a couple weeks ago, but I think that's coming out maybe in his next film. So I don't want to blow it for him, but I think it's going to be pretty much what we just talked about. And we're going to find that the lineage of this DNA is going to trace right back to the ancient Levant.
Man,
And with that, I know you find it hard to believe that you can go and like look at what biblical people did here in the US, but you can. And
I mean,
we just touched on it here.
that is just flat awesome. Caleb, we need to go to Ohio, and I think this summer that's where we're gonna go. That'd be real awesome to go stand and look at these spots. Well, thank you so much, Fritz, for meeting with us and talk to us about this. We'd love to have you again at some point just to continue this conversation. Because just like the way most of these end is now, I have like 40 other questions that I wish I could just ask and we could talk for the next 4 hours on. But I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Well, get a couple of my books and look into it and discuss it.
Oh yeah.
I'll get into my theories on everything. But look at geometry. Get the Nephilim Chronicles Fallen Angels. Look at the numerology of gematria that also shows up in the Bible, and it shows up in these burial mounds. Why are there hinges that are 666 feet in circumference? Yeah. Why are there gateways that are 33 feet? Why are the gateways of the hinges always 33 feet? Can you think of something else that's a gateway that has the number 33 attached to it? Yeah.
You're just dropping them. You're dropping them, man. And now I'm like writing down more questions.
It's deep. It's really deep.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, there's if you read all my books, there will be no doubt of what you're looking at, and the Bible is just as close as Ohio.
Man, that's a good one. That's a good spot to end it right there. The Bible is just as close as Ohio. Thank you so much for talking to us, my friend.
All right, guys. It's a good talking to you. Have a good night.
Yes, sir. You too.
Thank you guys for listening to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. I know me and Caleb are just a couple of redneck theologians, right? Kind of came up with that term a little while ago, and it's just kind of making us laugh. But that's really just what we are, right? Every single one of us is a theologian. Sit there and just think about the Bible, and me and Caleb are rednecks, so that makes us redneck theologians. And so we just thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to just give us a holler and let us know about topics you may want to listen to, or things you may want to say, or if you have an idea for a guest host, or if you yourself want to be a guest host, just drop us a line. Just let us know. Just give us a ring on the old telly. Actually, not really. We don't have a cell phone number, right? But we do have an email, and you can send us an email, right, at raisingwildonespodcast@gmail.com. There'll be a link for that podcast down in the description. And so just kind of click on that and just let us know what you guys want to hear from us. And we like to hear from you guys too. We like to know what you guys think of our podcast. And so also just tell your friends, share it on social media. Just let people know when you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with your hunting buddies or fishing buddies. Just say, hey guys, listen to this podcast. It's these two rednecks, and they're kind of weird sometimes, but it's fine because they talk about some cool stuff. And so just let people know, and that's how the word gets out, and that's how it gets shared. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and for listening to us. And yeah, tune in next time for more from the Redneck Theologians.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to reach out and bring you some exciting news. Our Patreon is now live. Patreon is a way to support this podcast so we can keep it going. For $6 a month, which is the cost of a cup of coffee, you get exclusive content that is for members only. This includes special episodes, show notes, and early release of our upcoming episodes. As we grow, more will become available through our membership. Another exciting thing is that we will donate $1 out of the $6 membership fee to missions. This money will go into the hands of missionaries on the ground doing the Lord's work. We are working on this and will hopefully have a podcast episode where we interview the missionary soon, so stay tuned for this. So go to patreon.com/Raising the Wild Ones podcast, or click on the link to our Patreon site in the show notes below. Thank you for supporting this podcast, and God bless.